Nobody starts out intending to develop an addiction, but unfortunately, many people get caught in its snare. Research actually used to believe that people who developed addictions were somehow morally flawed or lacking in willpower. But today, scientists believe that addiction is a chronic disease that over time actually changes both the brain structure and the function. Just as cardiovascular disease damages the heart, addiction hijacks the brain. There's no single cause of addiction, and it can be hard to figure out why some people become addicted and others don't. Researchers believe that there are several factors that can influence the development of addiction. There appears to be a genetic link to addiction. So if your parents or other family members have struggled with or are struggling with addiction, you do have a higher statistical chance of developing an addiction too. But sometimes it's just some traumatic childhood experiences, emotional or physical or sexual abuse, that can trigger addiction when people seek comfort or an escape from the pain of past experiences. And young adults may sometimes have friends who use alcohol and other drugs, and peer influence can lead to experimenting with addictive substances. Addictions are also more common in people with other mental health issues such as depression or anxiety. It could be that people with mental health issues use addictive substances or activities to help them feel better. But in fact, unfortunately, the opposite happens. Now, some people, and this can be fairly common, may actually turn to substances or activities to relieve stress or help them cope with certain situations and feelings. In fact, some research believe that addicts abuse alcohol or other substances to protect themselves against overwhelming anxiety and other painful emotions such as loneliness and depression. If your loved one is struggling with addiction, it's very important that you're willing to face the truth that this may be a little bit more serious than they're letting on. Hoping that they'll grow out of it or somehow be delivered from it isn't always the best solution. Yes, Jesus will sometimes deliver people from their addictions, but if they don't examine some of the underlying root causes of their addictions in the first place, they may find themselves with other unhealthy patterns of dependence, even if they've managed to kick their original addiction. They're going to often need professional help to assess them and recommend treatment options. Now, if they refuse to get professional help, then you go seek help. You can get support on how to set boundaries, how to draw a line in the sand, and how to refuse to enable their bad choices. While changing their outward behavior is an important part of overcoming addictions, it's really important to understand the internal triggers that led to the addiction in the first place. So if your loved one is trying to overcome their addiction by just sheer determination and just gritting their teeth to stop their addictive behavior without dealing with the underlying issues or pain or dysfunction, they might find themselves relapsing. Many times people with addictions will refuse to admit that they have a problem. And so families can get into this dysfunctional dance where they try to help. Their loved one gets into trouble, they step in to try to help, and the addicts are clean for a while, but then they start using again, and on the cycle goes. The whole family's life just becomes wrapped around after one crisis after another. And in our fear for their safety, we can sometimes interfere with the hard lessons that our loved ones need to learn to turn away from their bad choices. One of the hardest things we may have to do is watch them hit rock bottom. We might have to let them go their way so that when the consequences of their choices becomes unbearable for them, they finally come to their senses. I know it can feel like you're abandoning your loved one, but you're actually doing the most loving thing to ensure that they're able to finally take responsibility for their own choices and that they grow through their mistakes. And for those of us who are Christ followers, this can be a time of intense faith building as you learn to release to God the care and well-being of your loved one. If you can just focus on the truth that God loves them more than you do, He's sovereign, and He has promised to redeem everything for good in their lives, even their worst mistakes, when they turn back to God, then perhaps you can choose to hold on to hope. I strongly encourage you, connect with other families in your church or community who have walked in your shoes. They can help give you a sense of hope and strength during this part of your journey. And if you're the one suffering from an addiction, please, no shame or condemnation, get some help. I'm Dr. Lynn.